love talking about freedom of speech. I love the fact that the Sun News Network allows me to do so and even backs me up legally. I love the fact that the Canadian Parliament has repealed Section 13, the censorship provision of the Human Rights Act. But it wasn't always this way, and defenders of free speech weren't always so lucky or successful. Joining me now via Skype from Victoria, British Columbia, is Doug Christie, a man who has defended, I would say, the majority of free speech cases in Canada going back more than 20 years. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Well, thank you very much, Ezra. Nice to be able to talk to you.
Well, I mean, I've been in some of these fights more recently when I published the Danish Cartoons of Mohammed in 2006. I'm fighting the Broadcast Standards Council right now. But you were there in the early days. You've defended some of the toughest cases. Jim Keegstra, who was Ernst Zundel. You were even there in 1990 when Section 13 went to the Supreme Court and survived by a vote of 4-3. Tell me what you see in this arc of history, how censorship has been treated in the law and in the court of public opinion.
Well, very much like it was in the McCarthy era in the United States, the process of free speech is a bit cyclical. For example, in 1990, when I took the John Ross Taylor case to the Supreme Court, as you say, 4-3 against me, there was then, I think, a vast number of interveners. Almost every province, the Attorney General of Canada, was upholding Section 13(1). Well, as you may know, the Attorney General of Canada did not uphold Section 13(1) recently when it was struck down by the Human Rights Tribunal itself. And they did not intervene to uphold it before the federal court, where it sits right now. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's in the court, the trial division of the federal court, on a reserve judgment as to whether the law itself is constitutionally valid. So I would say that the tide has turned in favor of free speech. There was, I think, a lot of hysteria about the Keegstra and Zundel cases that really, I thought, prevented a fair trial, and I think things are getting better.
I'm going to agree with you there. I mean, you have been called, I've seen other journalists refer to you as a lawyer for the damned. And really, if you're in the free speech business, you've got to be, because, you know, you're not going to be defending cooking shows or weather reporters. They don't talk about controversial things. By definition, if you're a free speech lawyer, you are going to be defending people who say offensive things. Now, Doug, here's the thing. In the States, when there's someone who's parading at a neo-Nazi event, the ACLU typically sends a Jewish or a black lawyer to make the point that it's not about the substance and that a Jew can love free speech even for a Nazi. Tell me about your own role. I know you have been called a variety of names because you have defended these people who have offended politically correct norms. How did you get into the free speech business in the first place?
Well, basically, I sort of grew up with the feeling that it's important to hear from someone rather than about them. I always like to, for myself, I like to say, well, I've heard a lot about you, but I want to hear what you really have to say from you. And with that attitude in mind, I was sort of active politically in the early 80s. And I guess that's how Mr. Keegstra heard about me, and he contacted me, and I acted for him. And then from there on, it was kind of like one thing after another, because there were so few people willing to take the chance in those days, because you're very clearly right. If you defend a controversial person, you become controversial. And if you defend someone who has views that are vilified, you too become vilified. My office vandalized many, many times. My windows smashed, truck driven through the front of my office, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's how I got involved with basically the feeling that free speech is the best alternative for finding truth. And I think the Supreme Court, at least Madam Justice McLaughlin at one time in Zundel, for instance, agreed. I'm hopeful that with the new cases, I think from Saskatchewan, the Watcott case, which is reserved right now, I think there may be a greater realization that we need to tolerate what we call bad speech in order to have any speech that really matters.
Now, let me ask you this. As we've been talking, some images have been on the screen, including people like Ernst Zundel, Jim Keegstra. We haven't mentioned David Ahenakew, the late Aboriginal leader. it's always been my contention, Doug, that some of these people are cranks. I think some of their views are odious, but I think that by prosecuting them either through human rights courts or the criminal courts, we give them enormous publicity. Like, in my opinion, Ernst Zundel was a goofy eccentric with a hard hat that no one would pay attention to, but he's been turned into an international celebrity by the very government that wanted to silence him. Isn't there sort of a paradox of suing someone because you just make them mysterious and even sexy? I mean, David Ahenike, I don't think more than a couple hundred people heard what he had to say, and I don't know how many were persuaded, but he was made famous by the government. Yeah, well, he didn't actually intend anyone to hear what he had to say, except the guy he was talking to at the time, but nevertheless. Yeah, you're right. The effect of a trial has always been to publicize the thoughts, words, opinions, beliefs being censored. And censorship really never works. I think people should have looked at history and realized that. I mean, the Inquisition didn't work. The Reformation still occurred. Maybe a good thing. The fact that you try to silence someone is a pretty strong indication that other people are going to think that they have something truthful to say, and maybe they do. Maybe they don't, but, you know, we have to hear these things in order to make valid judgments. We don't need the government to decide for ourselves, and when the government says, we're going to tell you what is true, false, right, or wrong, you know, there are a lot of people like me who say, no, I can do that for myself, thanks, and I want to find out. And consequently, when they have these trials, the individuals become much better known, and exactly what they did say also becomes better known. Doug Christie, we got to wrap it up there because we're out of time. I'd like to talk to you some more because you have all the cases I've just been looking up in the history books. You were actually there fighting them. I'd like to talk to you again sometime, maybe even in studio in Toronto next time you're here. Well, whatever. I think it's the most important topic, and thank you for covering it.